Previously on the show, the Travelers, in a desperate bid to reclaim their homeland, united their entire tribe to cast an anti-magic spell across the land. Luke and Liv, trying to stop the Travelers, attempted to kill either Stefan or Elena, but ended up killing Maria instead. Julian killed Stefan in retaliation for Maria's death. To eliminate the Travelers, Matt and Jeremy caused a gas leak at the bar, and Damon and Elena drove a car into it, triggering an explosion that killed all the Travelers gathered inside. Bonnie used the Travelers' method of resurrecting Marcos to bring back Stefan and others, but because Luke stopped Liv's spell, Damon couldn't return to the living world. As the mystical anchor, Bonnie died with the collapse of the other side. The story picks up from the last episode. This is a prison world, where the prisoners are trapped, living the same day over and over again. After the other side collapsed, Damon and Bonnie were consumed by a blinding light. When the light faded, they were still standing in the same place, completely unharmed. So, they walked back to town. Strangely, not only was the town empty, but the bar that Damon had previously blown up was also intact. Damon and Bonnie realized something was off as they searched the entire town but couldn't find a single person. It wasn't until dawn that Damon and Bonnie noticed the cars parked along the streets were all vintage models, yet they looked brand new. Ahead of them stood Elena's house, but hadn't it been burned down by Elena long ago? Damon picked up a newspaper from the roadside. The date read May 10th, 1994, and the headline reported a rare solar eclipse happening today. Before long, the sky darkened, and the eclipse actually began. Had they traveled back in time, or were they in a parallel universe? Bonnie told Damon that at the moment the other side collapsed, her grandmother grabbed her hand and brought them here. Bonnie speculated that if she could regain her magic, they might be able to escape this place. Bonnie prepared to search for her grandmother's magic book. If this really was 1994, the magic book should still exist. Damon moved into his old mansion. The next morning, Bonnie arrived, not only having found her grandmother's magic book, but also the panda bear she'd lost in her childhood. Bonnie planned to relearn magic. Damon wasn't optimistic. He suggested Bonnie pass the time by doing the crossword puzzle in the newspaper instead. Suddenly the eclipse happened again, confirming they were stuck in a time loop, living the same day, May 10th, 1994. Damon began to reminisce about the past and couldn't help but remark that this place felt like hell.
Custom-built hell. You're in it with me. Thumbs up.
Without even realizing it, 4 months had passed. They did the same things day after day. Damon's cooking skills improved dramatically. Bonnie hadn't regained her magic, and she couldn't even solve the crossword puzzle, which frustrated her. They constantly argued and made up, since they were the only two people in this world. Losing each other would be the true hell. Occasionally, Bonnie heard strange noises, but Damon always dismissed them. With his heightened vampire senses, he was certain there was no other living soul in this world besides them. They had developed a rhythm, arguing by day and making peace by night. One evening during dinner, Damon suddenly noticed that the crossword puzzle in the newspaper had been solved. Bonnie's expression shifted from surprise to seriousness as Damon praised her.
Are you messing with me?
No, you're messing with me?
I didn't finish this.
There was a third person in this prison world. They had been living here for 4 months without realizing that someone else was with them. This was a special prison transport, nicknamed the Vampire Crematorium on Wheels. The soundproofing and fireproofing were top-notch, allowing the passenger to scream all they wanted. The driver was a ruthless man. A new vampire hunter appeared in town. He was even more cold-blooded and merciless, armed with top-of-the-line gear. And the vampires had no idea. Caroline was furious when she found out that Stefan had given up searching for Damon and Bonnie. Alaric told Caroline that there was still one person who hadn't given up. Meanwhile, the rogue Enzo was busy seducing a witch. You have to hand it to Enzo. He's a true brother, willing to sell his body to save Damon. The witch told Enzo that there was a Gemini Coven gathering in Oregon. They weren't large in number but were known to be an odd bunch, misfits among witches. They might know Damon's whereabouts. Just as they were getting intimate, Caroline showed up. Seeing Enzo put in so much effort to save Damon gave Caroline a deep sense of relief. On the other side, Elena asked Alaric to compel her to erase her love for Damon. Alaric had gone through every psychology book he could find. He believed that erasing all memories of Damon could affect Elena's other memories. Alaric suggested they find the moment when Elena first fell in love with Damon and use that as a starting point to rewrite her memories. This required Elena to confess when exactly she fell in love with Damon. Caroline thought Enzo was taking her to the Gemini Coven headquarters, but to her surprise, Enzo said they were going to meet an old friend. In an effort to escape reality, Stefan started living an ordinary life, and his cooking skills improved more and more. While his girlfriend Ivy was still out, he secretly fed on blood. Ivy unexpectedly returned with 2 people claiming to be Stefan's friends. Enzo made himself at home, eager to try Stefan's cooking. Caroline, on the other hand, was full of resentment. No wonder he hadn't been in touch. He'd been living quite comfortably. At the dinner table, Ivy was curious about Stefan's past, while Caroline restrained herself and simply said they were high school friends. Enzo, however, kept making sarcastic comments. First, he complimented Ivy's neck, revealing his obsession with necks.
Is Enzo your boyfriend? Oh God, no. Would you date that?
Hello, I'm right here.
Enzo was there to stir things up. When he learned that Stefan was working at a repair shop, even Caroline couldn't help but criticize Stefan for giving up on the investigation. Ivy couldn't understand their conversation, but she knew these visitors weren't friendly. Stefan's indifferent attitude infuriated Caroline. Enzo, playing the peacemaker, broke the tension. Then, Enzo exposed Stefan's vampire identity right to his face. Caroline quickly compelled Ivy and took her away, while reminding them not to fight. But Enzo had been itching for a fight. Furious that Stefan had given up on searching for Damon, Enzo attacked. They fought brutally, and in the end, Stefan snapped Enzo's neck. At the same time, Caroline got a call from Alaric. It turned out Elena wasn't being honest. She firmly insisted that she only fell in love with Damon after breaking up with Stefan, which made the compulsion process difficult. Caroline told Alaric that Elena had fallen for Damon while she was still with Stefan. Stefan overheard this. It was like rubbing salt in an old wound for Stefan. While Enzo was still down, Caroline confronted Stefan, demanding to know why he hadn't been answering her calls. Stefan's excuse was that he wanted a fresh start.
I couldn't just live my old life with my old friends. I couldn't go near Mystic Falls or Elena
Or me?
Stefan would rather love a stranger than be with her, which broke Caroline's heart. It turned out she'd been in unrequited love all along. Meanwhile, Alaric forced Elena to confront the truth she didn't want to admit. Elena had no choice but to confess that the moment she truly fell in love with Damon was when he helped her put on her necklace. The necklace may have been a gift from Stefan, but Damon had always been the one to help her find it again and again. Now that they'd found the moment their love began, Alaric used compulsion to make Elena forget her love for Damon. All she remembered was how Damon had hurt Jeremy time and again, and that Damon was a true monster.
Who is Damon Salvatore?
He's Stefan's brother. He's a monster. And then he died.
When Enzo woke up, he found Caroline crying in the car. Without saying a word, he rushed back to settle the score for Caroline. Because Stefan let his guard down, Enzo was able to sneak into the house and take Ivy hostage. To punish Stefan for hurting Caroline, Enzo snapped Ivy's neck. For hurting Caroline and abandoning Damon, Enzo swore he would never let Stefan have peace. Stefan was furious, but this time, Enzo had the upper hand. The girl Sarah, who was previously bitten by Elena, now wanted to stay at Matt's place. Sarah admitted that she was there to find her family, but Matt was reluctant to take her in because of her past as a car thief. Jeremy, however, took pity on her and invited Sarah to stay at Damon's mansion. The next day, Sheriff Tripp contacted Matt. After observing him for the past few days, Tripp was very impressed with Matt. Tripp's family had also been one of the founders of Mystic Falls. He had returned home to serve as the town's sheriff in order to restore his family's honor. After hanging up, Tripp brought some captured vampires into Mystic Falls. The anti-magic barrier caused the vampires excruciating pain. Never shortchange a vampire's salary, or he'll use his compulsion powers to force his boss to give him a promotion and a raise. Stefan, living a quiet life to experience normalcy, had taken a low-paying, grueling job and was sharing a life with an ordinary girl. But his old rival Enzo showed up and killed his girlfriend right in front of him. Stefan decided it was time to return to his old life. He first asked his boss for some time off, but his boss refused. Stefan lifted his boss up with one hand, revealing his true identity. He then compelled his boss to help him bury his girlfriend's body. Ever since Elena had forgotten about Damon, she immediately moved on from her grief and had been flirting with her classmate Liam. Stefan's appearance delighted Elena. After a brief catch-up, Elena invited Stefan to a pool party. Stefan had come for revenge and intended to decline, but when he heard Enzo would be there, he immediately changed his mind. Reckless and free-spirited, Enzo made Caroline feel both love and hate. Sometimes he was a reliable ally, and other times he was a troublemaker. So, Caroline laid down 3 ground rules for Enzo. He was not to mention Damon in front of Elena, he couldn't feed on anyone at the party, and he absolutely couldn't bring up Stefan in her presence.
Don't ever mention that jerk's name again.
Or you'll kill me. Got it.
Meanwhile, Tripp was washing his car when Matt came to ask for time off. Tripp, citing an increase in animal attacks, ordered an assistant to go with Matt to the party. At the party, Elena's stunning figure and impressive diving skills became the center of attention. While Liam was mesmerized, Stefan quietly slipped away. Elena then discovered that her brother Jeremy was hooking up with the mysterious Sarah. When Sarah saw Elena, she gasped, but quickly composed herself. After learning that Elena was Jeremy's sister, Sarah left with a cold expression. Could it be that Sarah remembered being bitten by Elena? Under Caroline's influence, even Enzo had to work a regular job, but Stefan suddenly ambushed Enzo.
That was Caroline's eyes.
Yeah, well, you'll be dead, so I think she'll let you off the hook.
Stefan wanted a fight to the death, but Enzo ended up saving him. It turned out that the person who had come with Matt was actually a vampire hunter. Caroline, still waiting for ice that hadn't arrived, compelled a girl to go fetch it. At that moment, Caroline received a distress text from Enzo. It turned out that Stefan wasn't grateful at all for Enzo saving him. He used a hunter's weapon against Enzo instead. Luckily, Caroline arrived just in time. Out of respect for Caroline, Stefan spared Enzo, who then confessed to killing Stefan's girlfriend. Caroline tried to comfort Stefan, believing that he had been constantly running away from reality. First, he had hidden in isolation, and now he was using hatred to avoid facing reality. Caroline wanted Stefan to stay, but he left without a word. Elena watched the scene unfold, while Caroline fought back tears and forced a smile. Matt was horrified to learn that his companion was a vampire hunter. He recalled what the sheriff had told him and suddenly realized the truth. Tripp wasn't just the town's sheriff. He was the head of a group of vampire hunters. At the party, Jeremy noticed that the compelled girl not only hadn't brought the ice, but was also complaining about why she had to follow Caroline's orders. Jeremy immediately realized something was wrong. The anti-magic barrier had nullified vampire compulsion. This meant that the mysterious Sarah had already regained her memories. She knew Elena and Caroline's true identities. Everyone spread out to search for the missing Sarah. Enzo went to the bar to relax with a drink, but found only an old man inside. Tripp ambushed Enzo, but what he didn't expect was that Enzo had a strong resistance to vervain. The poison wasn't enough to take him down. Just as Enzo was about to turn the tables, Stefan struck again, dealing a heavy blow to Enzo. He still couldn't let go of his hatred. Tripp was grateful to Stefan, completely unaware that the man in front of him was also a vampire. Stefan handed Enzo's life over to Tripp, with only one condition.
Just make sure it's painful.
An empty world, an endlessly repeating, monotonous life. Damon and Bonnie had completely lost hope of escaping. The shelves at the supermarket restocked themselves every day, but this time, Bonnie noticed that the pork rinds were missing and the carousel outside had somehow been activated. Given how the crossword puzzle mysteriously got solved a few days ago, they began to suspect that there was a third prisoner in this prison world, someone who had been watching them all along without ever being detected. It's terrifying to think about. At that moment, Damon discovered his beloved car. His childish excitement momentarily lightened the tense atmosphere. Suddenly, they saw a shadow dart by, and Damon and Bonnie decided to split up and search. In the supermarket, Damon was lured by the sight of alcohol when he heard a faint crunch. He walked closer and found a young man eating snacks. The boy introduced himself as Kai, Prison World's prisoner number 1. He had been watching Damon and Bonnie's every move as if he were tuning into a TV show. He even knew how many times Damon and Bonnie had argued. Damon's expression darkened and he prepared to teach the smug teenager a lesson. Unexpectedly, Kai immediately backed down, explaining that he hadn't talked to anyone in a long time and didn't mean to offend Damon. Damon wanted to know where Kai came from and why he had been spying on them. Kai, looking forlorn, said that his story would be the perfect companion to Damon's drink.
It's because I want to kill you.
Damon grabbed a bottle of liquor, ready to take a swig, but Kai's tone suddenly changed. Damon thought Kai's words were laughable until he realized the reason Kai was smiling. It wasn't the threat, but the fact that the liquor was poisoned. Kai had laced all the alcohol with vervain, unsure which bottle Damon would choose. Just as Kai was about to stab Damon in the heart, Bonnie arrived. Kai called Bonnie useless, disappointed that despite 4 months of attempts, she still hadn't regained her magic.
Run. Phasmatos. Incendia.
With Damon's life hanging in the balance, Bonnie finally broke through her limits. She lit a candle using her magic. Seeing the situation turn, Kai immediately raised his hands in surrender. He is not only flexible, but also knows how to adapt to the situation. Kai bluntly states that he is on the same side as they are. The reason he tried to kill Damon was to unlock Bonnie's potential, and he had succeeded. Damon and Bonnie exchanged a glance. They weren't buying his story. Kai had been hiding for 4 months. The reason he revealed himself now was because Bonnie's prolonged failure to regain her magic had drained his patience, forcing him to resort to desperate measures.
Because your magic is the key to getting the hell out of here.
Kai was born into a family of witches, but he had no magic of his own. Yet, he became every witch's worst nightmare. The witches created this prison world and banished Kai here, condemning him to relive the same day over and over for eternity, until 20 years later, Damon and Bonnie accidentally entered this prison world. Kai knew how to escape, but he was deeply curious about why Damon had once called this day his personal hell. So, what exactly had Damon done? Damon's anger flared. Bonnie was also interested. Reluctantly, Damon confessed the worst thing he had ever done. In 1994, a reformed Damon returned to his hometown. 50 years later, the brothers reunited, and their past grudges had become nothing more than a laughable memory. Zach was their uncle in name only, but in terms of seniority, the brothers were Zach's ancestors. After Stefan laid down some ground rules, Zach finally invited Damon into the house. At first, Damon behaved himself. Zach and his pregnant wife took verbena daily, so Stefan wasn't too worried. As Damon's story reached this point, Kai had already guessed the ending. Damon must have lost control and drained the pregnant woman dry, leading to another fallout between the brothers. Bonnie was equally curious and pressed Damon, asking if he had really done something that terrible. Damon chose to evade the question, instead unleashing his anger on Kai. To calm Damon down, Kai revealed the way to escape the prison world. His family owned an artifact called the Ascendant, which could harness the power of the eclipse. He needed Bonnie to cast a locator spell to find the Ascendant's whereabouts. While Bonnie was casting the spell, Damon couldn't help but recall what he had done on the day of the eclipse. Zach hosted a party at the mansion to watch the solar eclipse, while Damon and Sheriff Forbes discussed a mischievous young Caroline. Stefan suddenly noticed 2 bite marks on Zach's wife's wrist and furiously confronted Damon. Damon had no choice but to hypnotize Sheriff Forbes to make her leave the party early. As it turned out, Damon had secretly swapped the verbena. While he had promised not to kill anyone, that didn't mean he wouldn't feed. When Damon woke up, he found that Stefan had taken away his daylight ring. Stefan was deeply disappointed in his brother, accusing him of always trying to destroy everything he had worked so hard to build. Each of Stefan's words cut Damon to the core.
That's a no on the road trip.
Bonnie's chanting interrupted Damon's thoughts. Kai's blood flowed across the map, leading them to the location of the Ascendant, only to reveal that it was right where they were standing. Bonnie followed the magical pull and placed her hand on Kai's chest. Kai, confused at first, then smirked and pulled out a delicate-looking compass from his pocket. It had all been a test for Bonnie. This guy is full of lies, loves to put on a show, and seriously deserves a beating. They prepared to locate the source of power before the eclipse occurred. Bonnie suddenly noticed scattered newspapers. Paper planes Damon had folded out of boredom. One article caught Bonnie's eye. It reported a murder in Oregon on May 10, 1994. 4 siblings were killed, and the youngest son, Malachi, was missing.
My name's a kid Malachi. It's like they expected me to be evil.
All these kids were murdered.
Hello? Not everyone died. I had a soft spot for one of my sisters, so otherwise I would have cut her lungs out, and not just her spleen.
Bonnie and Damon were both shocked. Kai, as if showing off, detailed each of the siblings' deaths, because he is the same Malachi who killed the 4 siblings. It turned out his whole family was made up of witches, but Kai had been born without magic. To imprison him, the Gemini Coven had created this prison world.
This isn't your hell, Damon. It's mine.